Thank you, Matt, for hosting this. I've been to every MacDevOps. I think I've presented here like 3 times before. And under I shouldn't be here. Like, we moved on Monday. There's a lot going on, but there's no way that I would miss this conference ever. And I can't wait to get my MacDevOps 10 shirt. Maybe public beta? I don't know, we'll see. Anyways, so this talk is about massively deploying security keys with just a little bit of help from osquery and some friends. First, it's a 15-minute talk, so a 15-second disclaimer. This talk is purely comprised of my own personal views, which do not necessarily reflect the views of past, present, or future employers. And I'm happily here on my own accord. But maybe I can persuade employers, I don't know. Anyways, so a little bit about me. You know, I love all kinds of things, you know, like web authn, making people update their computers, deploying a lot of Chromebooks, coming to MacDevOps, installing betas on every device that I brought with me, and having my keyboard stop working, I don't know. But just like a lot of people, I don't love passwords anymore. I really hate web views. And I really hated being away from here for 4 years. But here we are. So, I mean, I don't like passwords, and like we don't have to like beat a dead bee about like passwords and what you should be doing or anything like that. Like, you can go read about all these breaches. Passwords are terrible. NIST has this great doc to read through about like different kinds of authenticators and you know what you should be doing. This is a great doc. Go read it. It's long, but like things are quite well justified, and I would very much recommend it. So, what do we want to do? Clearly, we want to move from passwords to something better. And, you know, if you've been paying attention to WWDC and everything, like, passkeys are where we want to end up. But, unfortunately, like, passkeys aren't truly deployable today. If you want to use passkeys today in the Apple ecosystem, you need an Apple ID. Managed Apple IDs will now support passkeys, but getting managed Apple IDs set up in your environment and getting all of that done is probably a lot of work. If you're starting a new company from square one, you could probably do this today. But if you're in a larger business, if you're in a larger organization, and you're like, passwords need to go right now, having managed Apple IDs being a prerequisite to that probably isn't something you can do. So we need a little bit of a pit stop on the way to passkeys. And what that's going to look like is this. We're going to go from passwords to security keys, and we'll be on security keys for a while, and then once passkeys are truly deployable in the enterprise, then we can move to that. You know, we can stop wasting people's USB ports, and you know, just generally have a better time. But for now, for today, security keys are the path to elimination of passwords in the enterprise. But this is a project that we got to do with friends. You know, I might be that security guy that says, hey, passwords are bad. We got to get rid of them. But you're going to have a lot of teams involved here where you're going to have friends. Now, I don't know about every organization, but you probably don't have the same team that owns the security, like your corporate security team, that manages all your endpoints and owns user identities at your company. And the team that does user support is probably also a different team as well. So we got to have this mega team together. And what I've kind of come to realize over the past few years is that great engineers in the corporate security, client engineering, and identity engineering space have like 99% of overlap. And I'm not talking about like, hey, chimpanzees share 99% of their DNA with humans. It's like they're pretty much the same, just a little bit different perspectives. All these people need to know about XML, maybe for different reasons. You know, a client engineer has to deal with p-lists all the time, maybe not as much as they did in the past, but you know, they gotta know how p-lists work. Identity engineers need to deal with SAML, which is all based on XML, and security engineers need to know that XML parsers is probably a way that you're gonna get compromised, because I don't know if it's possible to truly create a secure XML parser. But the different perspectives here create a really interesting thing. So you're gonna all get together and say, hey, we're gonna deploy security keys to everybody. Client engineering needs to be involved because, you know, these security keys plug into the Macs, and we gotta burn those USB ports up. You know, identity engineering is gonna own your IDP, and security is gonna be the ones really pushing for this. So we'll all get together and work on this project. Now, we can go back to the Mac. You know, this is probably, if you're here, this is what your environment looks like, a bunch of Macs. Like, this is a 14-inch MacBook Pro. It's a great computer. And thankfully, the 12-inch MacBook doesn't support macOS 14, so now we know that every Mac that Apple supports has a spare USB port that we can waste, maybe, on a security key to be basically permanently installed. You know, rest in peace, 12-inch MacBook. All right, so we're gonna shove one of these little keys in that spare USB port. And I am going to declare right now that the USB-C port on the right side of the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro is the perfect place for a YubiKey Nano. Like, that's probably why they put that port right there, just so you can slide your pinky finger right over and touch it. It's perfect. So we'll just slap one of these in every Mac, and we're good to go, right? Well, what about this iPhone 14 Pro? Like, this is a supercomputer in your pocket. But if we look at the ports, it's still got Lightning on it. Maybe this will change in the future, but that YubiKey Nano is not going to work. So, you know, we'll go. We'll be like, yeah, we need something that's got USB-C and Lightning on it, and go buy a security key like this. This is the YubiKey 5CI. It's like $80. I think it'd be really cool if you could like plug it into USB-C on your MacBook and then charge your phone with that, but it doesn't work. But resist the temptation. Do not buy these. They are a bad user experience. Like, if someone's got a bunch of keys and has to go shove this in their phone, it's no good. They're super expensive. And the true reality of these keys is this. They just fall apart. Don't buy them. Bad. But the iPhone has a magic thing up its sleeve called NFC. And that's how security keys should be used with phones, and you know, maybe until USB-C comes to the iPhone, but we'll see. So, you know, this is what those keys might look like. Ubico made this blue one for a long time. They've recently changed it to be black. I must save like a fraction of a penny on blue plastic, and now they just screen print Fido on the back. But this key you can just hold up to the top of the iPhone. It works great. I think it's a much better user experience of usability to be able to use. But what we really want to avoid is like bad user experience and lockouts. Like I talked about, you know, if you have a whole like keychain full of keys, holding up keys, not so great. And we can end up with users getting locked out if they, they only enrolled one credential and they don't have it with them, or, so I would call that like a permanent kind of lockout, or you have users running into places where they just can't log in for whatever reason. If they only enrolled a USB-C key and they're like, hey, I need to log into my iPhone, then they can't really do it. And we want to avoid that for a lot of reasons. Obviously, bad user experience is bad inherently, but a bad approach here can also introduce a lot of risk in your environment by users calling your help desk and being like, hey, I can't log in. Give me codes to let me in, bypass codes or security codes, whatever they're called based on your IDP. Like we really need to avoid those being a thing that exists. You can have all the identity verification in the world, but let's avoid all the social engineering possibilities and have that be a real exception rather than something that's happening all the time. We don't want to block users. We want them to have a good user experience and a good security perspective. So I've got a prescription for WebAuthn security keys in 2023, and that is a NFC and USB-C security key and a nano key or a passkey credential, probably local passkey credential in Chrome or whatever. The NFC key is something that you're going to use, say sparingly. It'll be that thing that you're not going to lose. If you're not going to lose your keys, just leave it on your keys, use it sometimes. And the one on the right is the one that you're going to use frequently. And if we use as directed, then we will end up with a good user experience and users not getting locked out all the time. But how do we ensure that users actually enroll credentials like this? It's kind of hard, actually. So we're going to set out with a little goal, and that's to know which security keys each user has enrolled and is using. Now, figuring this out really depends on your IDP, but the reality is that your IDP probably isn't going to tell you very much. When a user goes and enrolls a security key in their Google Workspace account, this is pretty much all you get. You get an audit log that says, hey, they've enrolled for two-step verification. An admin can go into the console and see what the user might have labeled their key as, but who knows what that is. Most users probably don't do it. It's just not there. And it's not available in an API, so kind of like useless, right? If we look at Okta, this is what a log entry looks like. We just get user setup FIDO WebAuthn factor. And that shows up the same whether it's a like passkey credential, whether it's a security key, whatever it may be. So also not super helpful, but truly the most helpful thing for us in both of these logs is that we know that it happened, we know who the user was, and we had a timestamp. So let's bring in osquery to help us get more information, and we'll be able to correlate that data with logs from our IDP. So we might try to do something simple like, have a query that selects from the USB devices that are attached to the computer. Now, in the world of Yubico, this is helpful, but not super helpful. If we look here, we can see that we get a model, but the model really just tells us the modes that are enabled on the key. It doesn't tell us which actual kind of key that it is. So if we look at the bottom there, like on the right-hand side, we have a security key, which is like the $29 one, and then we have a YubiKey 5 NFC, and that could both show up the same. And then on the left, we have a nano key and a full NFC key, and those can also show up the same. Just from looking at USB devices, you don't know what kind of key it is. And we can really look at this. This is actually a very nice documentation page that Yubico publishes where they document what the USB product ID is or could potentially be for each of their models. But it's clear this is not enough information to know what's going on. So in the spirit of MacDevOps, I decided to write an osquery extension to help me with this. And this is what the output of it looks like. I call it YubiKey devices, and what it does is interfaces with the keys. It's the same data that you would get from Yubico's command line tools, and it's able to report keys that are connected. In this case, I had 2 keys connected to my MacBook, and we can now tell them apart. We can see, the form factor as Yubico publishes it. We can see serial number. Interestingly, the cheap keys don't have a serial number, and we can see the different modes that are enabled or disabled. So if we take this data from osquery and look at, hey, what were the keys that were attached to the device or connected and disconnected from the device at the time that the enrollment of the credential happened, we can be pretty confident in where that credential lives, on what kind of device it lives. And through that, we can do all kinds of interesting things like that with that data. But I think really where it gets interesting, at least in the short term, is by having different types of user messaging. So this is just kind of 3 examples that I came up with. We want to steer users in the right direction. If we know that a user has plugged in multiple keys to their device, we can tell them, hey, we know that you have 2 keys, but you only have 1 enrolled. Click here and we'll take you through the steps to enroll another key. Or we know that they use an iPhone, but they haven't enrolled their NFC key, or they don't have one. We could take them to a custom ordering portal and have one shipped to them. Or let's say they're always using that NFC key and they're taking their keychain out and they're gonna it's just not a good user experience, but we can make their user experience better by steering them to create a passkey, which is the thing that they use sparingly, but isn't their true credential. We can steer them to do that. But I think kind of in short, and the osquery extension I will publish on GitHub. It's definitely could use some cleanup before I do that. But I think in short, I would say that passkeys are the future, but security keys are the now. I really am on the passkey hype train, but in June 2023, if the most important thing for your security is to eliminate memorized credentials that are easily phished, you're going to have to buy some security keys and roll them out. But we're going to have a talk up next about passkeys, and if we hop in a time machine, I don't know, 3 years in the future, hopefully all this stuff doesn't matter. We'll have a spare USB port on all our MacBooks, and we'll be in a good situation. So I hope this kind of approach can help some other orgs think about how to rapidly deploy security keys, but also end up with their users in a good authentication situation where you know what they have versus, hey, they have a credential, lock them out of all the insecure stuff. And that's it. Thanks.